Hello, everybody, and welcome to another exciting, fun-filled, expeditious episode of Radiorama, where, as the name implies, I show you how to work on primarily radios, but sometimes we work on other stuff, like televisions and stereos and record players. Mostly stuff that runs on vacuum tubes from the time period of about the 1930s through the 60s. I used to say 20s, but I haven't worked on much 20s stuff. We have a model unknown radio with incorrect knobs. There's no obvious markings other than what's left of this label. The back is in really rough shape. I do not know if it's working. The cord has been cut. My guess is it's probably a 5-tube set. And probably pre-war, meaning pre-war to the U.S. entry into World War II. So probably around 1930-ish, late 30-ish, early 40s. Definitely not post-war. The styling, that's not post-war. So I don't know what brand that is. I'm going to guess that maybe it's a Coronado. Only because I just worked on a Coronado and it had these same strange connections in the back for the antenna. So we'll see. I'm going to take it apart. And oftentimes it's not, unless you're missing parts, which I hope this is not, it's not critical to know the brand and model because they're all the same. All the A5 chassis, their circuits are very similar. So I'm not too concerned about it. That is, unless it's missing stuff. Here's another Coronado chassis here. And it too has these wings on the side for mounting into the chassis or the cabinet. Let's take it out and see what's going on. All right, well, taking it apart didn't reveal much more about what this could possibly be. It definitely has a realm of genericy. I'm not sure if that's the word, genericism. And it's got a Quam speaker. That's a kind of a generic. Construction is just, in my opinion, so-so. It looks like it is probably factory original. Maybe that's been replaced. We've got some signs of trauma here. We've got some wax that is completely melted out of this cap, meaning that's probably shorted. It is an All-American 5 design. Again, they made millions and millions of these. They were a cheap and dirty way, well, not really dirty. They were a cheap way to make a radio without a transformer, which cut down dramatically on the cost. Meaning the difference was something like $25 to $30 for a radio to $19 for a radio, which if you figure in inflation for the 1930s today to today, that is significant savings. It has this really pathetic looking antenna. I might have to actually figure out something else for the back as far as an antenna, but bare minimum it needs to have an overhaul, no doubt about it. I've got some things I don't like here. For example, this is to the ground cap, meaning the other side of the AC line. This is a huge capacitor. It's 0.2 of a microfarad. That would absolutely shock the crap out of you if you were to touch the chassis and ground at the same time. I see further evidence that makes me absolutely think this is a pre-war set. We've got a lot of this pre-World War II rubber wiring, rubber insulated wiring. Luckily, it looks like it's intact, especially the stuff going into the IF transformer. Don't touch it. This stuff will crumble if you look at it. We have two electrolytic capacitors here. One, two. The other end is the common ground. Without looking at it, putting 247 microfarad 160 volt caps should do the trick. I don't trust this at all. This needs to be replaced along with the grounding cap. There's not much to do here. Interestingly enough, we have this metal bodied cap that looks factory. That would have been a more expensive cap, so maybe the factory got a good deal on it. My guess is this. I think this is a... Oh, wait a minute. What's this? The tag here. That is the patent information. Basically, RCA owned all the patents to most of the American super heterodyne designs, In fact, RCA made a fortune licensing their technology globally. That goes to radio and television. That's why they were able to rest in their laurels way up until 1986, when they were abruptly taken over by General Electric and systematically taken apart, which is a real shame. But that's neither here nor there. We need to replace both of these, and while we're at it, replace the rest of the electrolytics, not the electrolytics, the rest of the paper caps. And we'll see if it works. Luckily, that's usually all you need to do, because a lot of these were put away working, or they had just stopped working, and due to the expense of electronics back then, people didn't throw things away as much. So there's a lot of these preserved. Millions and millions of them are still in existence. In fact, so common that most of these don't have, unless they're special, true collector value. That's why it's such a cheap hobby, because there's such a plethora of these guys out there. So let's get out the electrolytics and replace those first, and then we'll replace these paper caps, and then we're going to give it a test. And if we get it working, because it's a nice warm day, I'm going to clean the cabinet up and give it a paint job, because that paint is shot. All right, so let's get going. Basically, we had a show this weekend, and I brought approximately 50 table sets and 4 consoles, and we wound up selling 35 table sets and none of the consoles. And so now I have to rebuild the supply, which means the radio factory is back online. I'll need to restore approximately 30 more sets before October. Getting into September right now, so I have about a month. I don't think that's really going to happen, but we'll see. So the first thing I'm going to do is replace the electrolytics. I've already cut that out, and here are its 2 positive leads that appears to be going to the rectifier. We have 1 lead here and 1 lead there, and this is the common negative. We're going to put both of the common negatives here. So I have 2 of these. We're going to twist their negatives together, and they will go here, and then we'll run some jumper wires back and forth between these 2 positive connections. I already cut my wires to length. I had one person say, you need to pretend it's a cooking show and get all your stuff kind of pre-prepared. And you have to think in terms of layers and order of layout. So I know that this 0.05 rated cap, it's going to be a lot easier to replace it now. That is before I decide to put the 2 common negative leads of the new electrolytics on top of one of its leads. So that's exactly what I'm going to do. And how I replace capacitors, I clip one end of one lead of the old cap, and I solder in one lead of the new cap, and then I do the same on the other, which is clip the last old lead off of the old cap, and then solder in the second lead of the new cap. That way you don't lose your place. I know that sounds stupid, but I have done it many times. So with your electrolytics, your stripes are always your negative. And so since these are both going to share the same common negative, I'm going to twist their negative ends together like so, and then trim the excess. And since I know that it's going to require a lot of solder to kind of glob it onto that connection, I'm going to solder the crap out of this connection. And then I'm going to add a little more solder here. The idea is you kind of want to make sure that everything is welded together real nicely. Might as well go ahead and cut the negative lead that remains from the original electrolytic. Then we'll come in here and we'll solder the 2 new leads of the common negatives of the electrolytics in place. See how I kind of cinched it up there to where the leads are real short, so these are kind of stiff. That's what you want. So now let's go over here, and we will first of all make a mental note of where this is. Cut out the first positive lead from the old electrolytic, And we're going to just pile up a bunch of solder here. I'm going to wet my lead of my jumper wire, and then again we're just going to sink it down into that solder. We want to make sure it's really well embedded. And then we'll take my pliers. The nice smell of burning rubber in the morning. I say morning, it's about 11:30. I am between jobs right now. I have essentially about 2 weeks before I start a new position. Basically, the company that I was working for has been acquired by another company, and bottoms, long story short, I decided that it would be best if I found another job before that transaction happened. Unfortunately, I've had to do that way too many times. It's just par for the course for the industry that I work in. But oh well, that means I get to spend all this time working on radios and chatting with you fine folks, or talking to myself with you fine folks. So I'm going to do the same thing over here. I'm going to, again, pile up a lot of solder and wet the other end of the jumper wire come in. And again, we want to sink it into that solder. We want a nice, real good, solid metallic contact. Metallic, duh, obviously it's metallic. And we're going to come in here and twist this lead, and again we're going to make a little bit of a hook here. You want a good physical strong connection as well as your solder connection. There we are. So now the electrolytics, they are replaced. So now we need to take this guy and replace it. I want to see what's going on in the end here. Yeah, you can, not sure if you can see that, but this is melted and recessed into the body of that tubular capacitor. And so that is shorted. That could mean one of several things, either the cap shorted or the tube, which is a 35Z5, shorted. That's not too unusual. Those 35Z5s get smoking hot. There's all kinds of thermal stress going on in there. Out of all the octal tubes out there, it probably shorts the most, in my experience anyway. It's kind of the equivalent of the 35W4 in the miniature form. And now we're going to run that over to the other end here, and we're going to wrap it around. There's a tool called a pigtailer that apparently can do the same thing I'm doing, except it's much neater. It's just that I'm so stuck in my ways that I prefer doing it this way. Again, you want a good, strong physical connection. And we're going to solder that in place. Sometimes you want to check your soldering joints after they've cooled to make sure that there's not any wiggling. That's good. And just because I like to keep things neat, you want to trim your excess lead. I don't know, maybe 50 years from now, probably when I'm dead, some other person will come in here and say, look at that, they trimmed their leads nice and neatly. Now we're going to replace the most important cap in here. That is the to ground, other end of the line cord ground. Now I'm looking here to see if there's a more convenient way to route my ground, because all I need to do is go to chassis. This is important. This is a X2, Y2 across the line. It's 0.01 rated microfarads. It's many magnitudes smaller in capacitance than the original. And that's good, and it's also potentially bad. It's potentially bad because some radio manufacturers, in order to kind of cheat their way into getting less AC hum over their designs, would put in a massive capacitor to ground. It could just be that's what they had on hand. Maybe they got a good deal on that value. It passed safety for those standards back in the 30s and 40s. It would not pass now. So we're just going to move that ground to here. And that won't make one bit of difference as far as the set's performance. And again, we're looking for a good place to solder this in. That looks like a perfect place. And I use a Metcal soldering station. It gets things real hot. It just liquefies the solder. And that's real key. So we've replaced essentially all of the critical caps. This guy probably needs to be replaced too. This is the coupling cap that goes to the output tube. And I need to be real careful removing this guy because it is right up against some crumbly rubber wiring. And I don't want to crumble that wiring. I want to make sure it stays intact. Oh, come on. You can do it. Come out of there. Oh, let me trim some more of that off. And I'll just pull it out by hand. What are you? 0.01 microfarads. I want to make sure that red lead, which just crumbled, is not touching chassis. Just bend it up slowly. It is not. Might have to touch that up with some liquid tape. Now, let's get a 0.01 rated cap and put that in place. And then it'll be time to do some testing to see if this guy is going to work. Actually, I need to replace the power cord. Forgot that. Duh, it's not going to work without the power cord. So let's attach one end here. You have an advantage with the newer caps because they're physically smaller, so you can squeeze them into smaller spaces. Need to be mindful though, because this does slide into the Bakelite case with this here. We don't want that to block the path for that. Oh, it's being hateful. It's not wanting to attach properly. Come on now. Do your thing. There we go. That's better. And what do we have here? We have a loosey-goosey wire. Not sure if that's from the factory or what. All right, let's move this over to, again, we want to keep it out of the way of this slot here. Again, we're going to make a little bit of a hook. Hook it there. And we're going to solder into place. That may or may not be okay. There we go. All right. And we're going to trim the dress so it's neat. And I want to bend that in a little bit so it's not going to get in the way of that. Okay, so I'm going to replace the cord. Then we're going to do a little bit of a test, see if it works. All right, so now's the moment of truth. We're going to do a shotgun test, meaning it's just going to be plugged in. And either it's going to work or it's not going to work. And of course, I've got my cord all tangled up here. Aggravating. All right. Sorry, folks. I should have managed that before I started filming. Jesus. Let me put this back in its holster. All right. Fire in the hole. Oh, we got pilot light. That's good. And the pilot kind of flashed and went back down to settling into a dull glow. That means that we have filament on all the tubes. I see the rectifier glowing.
The program helped Christopher develop both his artistic and analytical skills, and he now credits the program with improving his work ethic.
I quote, "Your mother and I think you're pissing your life away." I said, "Whoa, you don't even know what I'm doing up here."
Alright, it sort of works, but the volume control is all funny. Probably we have a bunch of crap that's built up in the volume control that needs to be cleaned. Need to replace these other two caps. This one, Toby, this looks like a vitamin Q cap. That's probably okay. It's glass sealed on the ends. That guy definitely needs to be replaced. 0.005 microfarads. Let's do that. Cleaning this volume control is going to be difficult. It doesn't have an open wiper design. It's all sealed, so sometimes you just have to flood the shit out of it to get the juice down in there to clean the things. Well, guess what? I've lost power. The set has gone dead. So I might have blown a tube filament, or one of the tubes might have been on its way out. Hope it's not this guy. This guy's weird. This is a 45Z5. I can't think of the last time I've seen an AA5 with a 45Z5. It's usually 35Z5. It's always something, so I'll need to get out the old tube tester and do some testing. The switch is fine. The power's getting to the set, but I have no filament, so it's probably a tube. Well, it wasn't what I thought it was. The keyway off of this 12SQ7 is broken off. So I must have just put it in the wrong way. The keyway is at that slot right there. Hence, that probably described why I lost my filament, because the tube was not inserted properly. Let's see what it does now. All right, we've returned radio operation ability. Goody. I cleaned the volume pot, and now we have volume control.
Health issues. Anyway, Darwin's ideas were not picked up until the 30th. Look, wholesaling, for some reason. 23. You know, Salem, Massachusetts, big haven for witchcraft, and there are pockets all across the country.
Yeah. Witchcraft. I don't know what I'm going to do about that antenna, but the good news is that from a radio perspective, the set, although kind of grubby, seems to work okay. Next thing I'm going to do is switch my attention to the cabinet and get it prepped and ready for paint. Alright, so the next stage is to get the cabinet all prepared and ready. And, you know, I don't know what cleaners are available in other countries, but here we have this product called Simple Green. It's been around for a billion years. It's non-toxic, it's biodegradable, and it works great on cleaning stuff up. So what I generally do is I soak the cabinet in Simple Green. Just want to really get it wet. I'll let it sit for a few minutes, and that will kind of eat away all of the accumulated grime. This sink is filthy. My parents are actually flying in from across the country, so I'll need to make sure and have them think that I live like a halfway civilized person versus the filth that is my garage. Anyway, we'll let that sit for a few minutes, then it'll be time to scrub and get the surface ready for paint. Alright, so the radio is now cleaned up, prepped and ready for paint. I keep most of my large boxes that come in. They make great places to paint so you don't get crap all over your yard like mine, which is made out of rocks. Meaning if I get paint in my yard, it's there permanently. So what I like to do as well is I like to heat up the spray paint in some warm water. That makes it flow a lot better. I'll let it sit in there for about 5 minutes. And then it'll be time to go spray. Okay, so now I've got my spray paint out. I find this hardware store brand spray paint does a pretty good job. We sold all of the red radios, so I have none in my collection or none ready for any of our shows. So what you want to do, first test it, make sure there's no defects. There does not appear to be. And what you want to do is do wide sweeping strokes, and you don't ever want to stop on the work, meaning you don't want to be like, because you'll just make a big glob. This is going to be more of a challenge because we've got all these fins that are pretty deep. And I'm looking at the wind, it's blowing that way, so I'm going to turn the radio into the wind. I also elevate it a little bit because you don't want any ground effect dirt like sweeping into the finish. The other thing too I've discovered, not really discovered, I think everyone knows this, bugs for some reason just love spray paint. So here we go. White usually covers up a lot better. And you see I'm just kind of going around, making broad sweeping movements without stopping. Wind is really blowing today, it's making it more difficult. Alright, I'm not going to be able to film this, but you get the idea. Okay, I'm going to admit something. It's been a while since I've actually worked on this radio. I painted it a week ago. Then some consoles came in and I set it aside. And I'll be honest, I'm not happy with the paint job on it. The paint that I was using was some sort of generic, not grocery store, hardware store brand that used to be good, but it doesn't seem like it settles real well now. So now I'm going to put some Rust-Oleum on it. I've had some hit or miss luck with Rust-Oleum lately, so I hope this works. It's a little bit different of a red color. Okay, good, it's still spraying. So I'm just going to go over this whole thing again with several layers of more spray paint to get a more even, glossier finish. Okay, so that was after repeated applications of the paint. I think I'm going to keep the knobs white. That'll add just a little bit more of interest to it, a little bit of contrast. It's good and hot out here. It's great for paint to cure, so I'm going to let it cure and move back to the electronics, get those ready. Alright, so next thing I'm going to do after repainting the set is I'm going to add an audio input feature. I've mentioned this repeatedly on my shows. And what we're going to do is we're going to install this guy. This is an isolation transformer. There's 120 volts for the primary, 6 volts for the secondary. And we're going to have an audio signal come in through the primary, which is the high voltage side. Actually, I got this backwards. Scrap that. We're going to have audio come in through the secondary low voltage side. The primary, which is the high voltage side, goes to the top and the bottom of the volume control. And this is the volume control. This one's hard to see, but it has 3 legs. There's a top, bottom, and a center. The top is where your radio signal comes in. And this is, I've already clipped it. I just wanted to, what we also need to do is make it so we can turn the radio signal off and on, so that when we run audio through, you won't have radio interference. Likewise, if you want good clean radio, we'll have a little switch that goes back through here, and that'll turn this back off and on. I hope it'll work at least. Usually it does. And so this is the top of the volume control. The bottom is way down here. And what I tend to do is glue these in place as close as they can possibly be to the volume control. You can make sure and clean this surface up real well. Roughen both surfaces with sandpaper. Clean it with alcohol. And we're going to need to use a number of other components along the way to make sure that this doesn't interfere with radio, and that we can have a true mono input, meaning we're going to tie the right and left channels on the incoming audio together. So let's get out all the parts, and I will install it, and then I'll show you what I did, and then we can test to make sure it works. Alright, so this is what we're going to do. We have these 2 resistors tied together on one end. Right and left channel goes on either end there. You will put those right here on the secondary side of the transformer. Now, the other thing that we've found out over time is that if the set has an automatic gain control feature, which most of the sets from this time period do have, then this transformer, when left in circuit, will cause the radio to have some interference and nasty hash. So this shunts that. So this goes before going to the top of the pot. You'll see what I mean when I get it done. The other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to drill a hole for this cord. And I bought a box of these grommets, so you can put a grommet in the hole so that the cord doesn't chafe. I find that's a little bit neater. So I'll install that and I'll show you what that looks like. Okay, so I've got the audio running through the set. I had to make a little bit of a detour. For some reason, going to the top of the pot on this model resulted in distortion no matter what I did. So your second alternative is to run it through the, let's see here, one, two, pin number 4 of the output tube, which means the volume is exclusively controlled by the input device and not the volume control. Still works. It's just you have to remember to tell people you have to use the input device to control the volume. Okay, now that I turned the music off, I can explain a little bit about what I did, and now here comes the garbage truck. But anyway, we have our 2 right and left channels of the incoming audio going in through the split pair of resistors and then we have the negative of the incoming audio. That's going through a hole with a little grommet with a knot so you can't yank it out of there. This is going to, in this case, chassis ground. And this is going to pin number 4 of the 50L6 tube. Before I button this up, what I'm going to do is cover this with a little bit of glue, even though it shouldn't come loose, but if it ever does, I don't want it knocking around with exposed contacts. I know it doesn't look pretty when I'm done, but it's safe. And we've got our switch wire running out through the back here. That will basically connect or disconnect or reconnect the AM radio. So now with that done, let's go take a look and see what's happening with the case. It's been sitting here. We've been having 100+ degree weather here, so anything I paint I have to do later in the day. And that's looking a lot better. It's pretty glossy. I like that red better. And so it will do nicely to be put back together again. There's only 1 or 2 little things I need to do left, and one of those things includes, where did it go? Hope I didn't lose it. There's a plastic lens that goes on this that is not looking so good. Here it is. I want to buff it up with some Novus number 2. The other thing I forgot to mention, I did make a new back for this set. Initially, the original cardboard back was turned into mush, so I found this piece of pegboard, and I glued the old, well, I cut out the old wire wound antenna, and I stuck it to the back of this board. I know it doesn't look beautiful, but it's functional. So there. All right, so let me get the glue ready, put that on there. Then I need to start reassembling after I polish the plastic dial ends. All right, she works. Actually, when I got the case out of the driveway, it was hot to the touch. So that paint is probably really well baked on. I have a bunch of stereos and radios and stuff I'm working on right now. I'm trying to create a bunch of episodes in advance. I start a new job in a few days, and I was told it will be a very busy job. And so I just need to get with the rhythm and figure out my scheduling for working on radios. But anyway, when I was finishing up this episode, I just got word that the Queen Elizabeth passed away. And I know there's a few people from the UK that watch this channel, and so you have my condolences. She was quite the lady, a good person, and so sorry for your loss. All right, guys, until the next time a radio comes across the workbench or some other haphazard project that I want to share, I'll see you guys next time. Adios.